Well, hi, and welcome once again to an episode of Unstoppable Mindset. Today, our guest is Carlos Hidalgo. Carlos has many facets about him. He's a speaker, he deals with growth and growth management, and with his company, he tries to make growth simple for the people who are his clients. I'm interested in learning about that. But he does other things as well. He is also involved with his wife and marriage counseling, which is a little bit different than one I think I find a lot of people to do. So I think we got lots to talk about. So, Carlos, I want to welcome you to Unstoppable Mindset. We're glad you're here.
Thank you for having me, Michael. It's an absolute pleasure.
Well, let's start with the early Carlos. Why don't you tell us about you growing up and all that sort of thing and where you came from, where you're headed, or whatever?
Sure. I was born one of six children. I was the youngest for about 4 years. And then my parents had two more. So I am smack dab in the middle of six siblings. Was born in New Jersey, but call where I'm at now home, which is a little town in the Adirondack Mountains. And the reason I call it home, I started coming to camp here when I was 5 years old, fell in love with the area. And then my father in 1983 moved us up here when I was 12 and fell more in love with it. And that lasted for 4 years. And then my junior year of high school, or right after my sophomore year, was told, "Hey, we're moving." I was 16. I was pretty pissed off at the prospect of leaving a place I loved. So I had engineered a plan to stay through my junior and senior year of high school, which in my mind made perfect sense. In my parents' mind, and for reasons now I understand because I'm a parent, did not make so much sense. But I came back as often as I could. And then my wife and I moved here back full time in 2021. We also lived here in the 90s for 2 years, had our first son here. So, but grew up really charmed childhood. My dad was in advertising. So we got tickets to great sporting events. We had horses that I took care of along with some of my siblings. Developed a love of the outdoors, which I still hold, which is one of the many benefits of living up here again. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, pretty much early childhood was, be outside as much as I can, run around. Schoolwork wasn't my strong suit, but I muddled through and I made it.
Where in New Jersey were you born?
I was born in a little town called Randolph in northern Jersey. Right. Spent most of our time in a place called Blairistown. Their claim to fame is a prep school called Blair Academy, which I believe is still there. And then I believe it was the original Friday the 13th was filmed. Part of it was filmed in Blairistown, New Jersey.
Gosh.
So I do remember it. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm dating myself just a little bit.
Well, we lived in Westfield for 6 years, so kind of know New Jersey. Okay. But even while we were back there, my wife always wanted to move back to California. She's a native. I was born in Chicago. She wouldn't let me call myself a native, even though we moved to California when I was 5. But that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. People get a little touchy about the term native or local and how it's defined, right?
Oh, yeah. It varies all around the country, but there's nothing, you can't say anything bad about Chicago. They have Garrett popcorn there. If you've never had it, next time you go through O'Hare Airport, you should get some Garrett popcorn.
Okay. I will do that. Absolutely.
Take a memo. Get Garrett popcorn. It's really good stuff. Well, so what did you do for college, or did you?
Yeah, I went to my first year. I went to a school called Word of Life Bible Institute. So it's a 1-year intensive program study of the Bible. Actually, here, not far from, literally 8 miles down the road here from where I live now. And at that point, it was really just an excuse to get back to the Adirondacks for a year. But I learned a whole lot, met some incredible people, some of who I'm still very, very close with today. And then from there, I transferred to Cedarville University in Ohio. At the time I went there, we were about 2,500 students. I think today they're closer to 7,500. But I met my wife there, which was that in and of itself, worth the 3 years of tuition that I paid. As I transferred in, but studied business communication. Again, I wasn't a great student. What I realized is if it was the things that I really loved to participate in, It was awesome. I had a really great time studying communication and language and how we speak. I was 2 years on the debate team, which was such a great education in and of itself. But everything else I didn't really love. The general ed stuff, I kind of thought, well, if I can skate by and, get the passing grade, the credits. So that's really how I went about it. And the reality is the way things are taught today, I'm a very visual and hands-on learner. And so to sit in a classroom and try to take notes and go through theory and things like that just makes my brain hurt a little bit. So, but I finished. I got the degree and made some great friendships in the process.
Well, and clearly, based on what you did for your first year, you have a Christian orientation or definitely a God orientation as well.
Yeah, that's really my operating system, Michael. I am a follower of Jesus Christ. I believe the Bible is the inerrant word of God. I base my life on it. I spend time in it each and every day. And so what's interesting in that regard is, yes, I went to the Bible Institute. So while I had a lot of head knowledge about the Bible and God and Jesus and all these things, it's really been in the last 10 years that I would say I had a deep, meaningful relationship with him. And that came from a lot of experience in my life, a lot of dark moments in my life that were self-induced, unfortunately. But really what it's done for me is it's just radicalized who I am, changed my heart. And so it's gone from having a head knowledge of it to a real experience and an engagement with Christ through his word and through prayer.
Yeah, head knowledge is a fine thing as far as it goes, but there's nothing like personally experience coming closer to whatever it is, including dealing with believing in God and really recognizing what God brings. And my last book that I wrote that was published last year called Live Like a Guide Dog, True Stories from a Blind Man and His Dogs about being brave, overcoming adversity, and moving forward in faith, very much deals with a lot of that. The whole concept of the value and the power of personal knowledge as opposed to just head knowledge.
Yes.
I talk about the World Trade Center a lot in that book, specifically in terms of what I learned and how I developed a mindset to be able to control fear rather than letting it be the thing that overwhelmed me or overwhelms anyone. And I've had a couple people on this podcast who talk about it, and they say the same sort of thing that you did. It's not about knowledge that you sort of intellectually know. It's what you really know. So people, for example, in evacuating the World Trade Center would look at signs and they would follow those. And a lot of people were able to do that. But that's still not knowing. That is really relying on something else that you may or may not really have access to. So true knowledge is the only way to go.
100%. And I find that I gather that through experience.
Yeah.
And so the example I use is if you ask me about my wife, do you know Suzanne? I would say, oh yeah, blonde hair, blue eyes, about 5'5", funny, smart. I could tell you all the different facts, but there's a big difference when you sit and you get to experience being with her, seeing her, how she interacts with people, how she treats others. All of those things take that knowledge and actually make it an experience.
Yeah.
And so that's been the difference for me as it regard in my relationship with Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Well, and Suzanne. So that's good. Well,
yes, absolutely. 31 years and we're still going.
There you go. Well, keep going. That's cool. That's great to have that kind of a relationship. Awesome. It's all too often we don't see a lot of that in marriage, and just people get married without knowing, and that leads to all sorts of potential challenges. So it's good to really get to know someone.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm still learning, still studying her and learning all I can after 31 years.
And she is too.
Yes, she is. She does a phenomenal job.
So what did you do after college?
After college, I actually moved back up here where I'm at now. Worked for 2 years for Word of Life, the same group that ran the Bible Institute. So then actually, unbeknownst to me, my heart was really at that point, I wanted to go into law enforcement. My father-in-law was a FBI agent for 30 years. I'd always been intrigued by law enforcement. So I thought going into and getting a job for a few years, cutting my teeth while I filled out a resume. So started working in the Office of Donor Development or Advancement. And that was the first time I really started to get any exposure to anything formal, marketing wise. In the meantime, applied to the FBI, never went anywhere. Ended up applying again, never went anywhere. At that point, then we left here after 2 years of marriage and having one child. We moved to Michigan for a brief time, and then we went back from Michigan, we went to Dallas, where we lived for 13 years. And I worked while I was still trying to get into law enforcement. I kept getting marketing jobs in companies. So eventually I gave up the dream of law enforcement and just followed what's unfolding, and had a pretty good career in 2 software companies as a director of marketing. Got to cut my teeth and learn what global business was all about, do a lot of travel, which helped me career-wise, wasn't so great home-wise or parent-wise when you're away from your kids. But it's been my career for 30 plus years. I've had a heck of a career doing it and very grateful for it. But I still get intrigued at the whole concept of law enforcement, but I'm afraid I'm a little too old at this point to start down that path.
How come you kept not getting anywhere with it?
Well, I did get to a point where the FBI, I took a test when we lived in Dallas, and they called after, said I had scored well, which made me chuckle, but thinking back to my college days of test taking.
Yeah.
But and they said, "Hey, do you speak Spanish?" Which I do not, despite my name, which is very Spanish, Carlos Hidalgo. And they said, "Okay, right. Well, we'll keep your application on file. I'll let you know if anything changes." And that was the last I heard. So at that point, I just thought, okay, I can keep pushing this and trying. But again, as things started to unfold in the software world, the jobs that I had took care of my family. They provided well for us. They gave me opportunities to learn new things, try new things, opportunity to, like I said, international business, which I'd never done before. So at that point, I just thought, I'm kind of 7-8 years into this thing. What does this look like going forward? And then are we going to have to just hit reset in all facets of our lives, financially, where our kids are settled, for me to go into law enforcement? So I abandoned it, and I'm okay with that. I think it would have been a phenomenal career. I would have loved it. Like I said, I'm still intrigued by it. I still have great respect for it, but it just wasn't in the cards for me, and I'm okay with that. I think sometimes the way we grow is through the death of a dream.
Yeah, I know. I've always been intrigued by law and law enforcement, and I know that they're never going to hire me, and now they won't.
Right.
But they wouldn't hire me. But I took actually some courses in college dealing with police and other things like that because I was, and still am, fascinated by it. And I have a great respect for the law. And I admire good lawyers who are knowledgeable, who really are in it to deal with the law. And you can tell those from the typical ambulance type chaser who manipulates. Yes. But I really appreciate the law. I, in my life, have had the opportunity to be involved with some efforts of the National Federation of the Blind, where we've gone several times to Washington to meet with congressional types. And so I've met some interesting people, met Ted Kennedy, met Tip O'Neill when he was still speaker, Senator Saugus from Massachusetts and others, and found and through them got to meet some people who were truly committed to what they were doing. They weren't in it for the power. They were in it to try to really help the country and help their individual constituencies and their states and so on. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, I'm sure it was. That's quite a roster of people you've been able to engage with, and I'm sure, no doubt, influence.
Well, and we were there to talk about legislation that we needed, but I'll never forget, first time we went in and we met Paul Songus, we talked about what we wanted to talk about. And he said, well, it's the end of the day. What are you guys doing now? And we said, well, we're just going to go back to the hotel. And he said, you got a few minutes? I want to talk to you about Massachusetts. Well, we ended up
Huh.
staying for 2 hours. It was a lot of fun.
Wow. Yeah, that is a lot of fun. I had an opportunity a number of years ago to do a tour of the West Wing, which was just phenomenal. So when you get those opportunities, I don't care what
Yeah.
side of the aisle you may sit on or are partial to. The answer is yes, take it
Yep.
because you learn a whole lot, and it gives you a whole new appreciation for our country.
Well, 20 years ago, I was invited to come back and meet George W. Bush because a
Mm,
congressman I had met was fascinated by my story and the story of my guide dog Roselle, and he arranged for us to meet George W. And we went back. It was supposed to be a brief, like 2 minute just photo op. It ended
sure.
up being like a 15-minute conversation, and then it was a lot of fun. And I hope that we inspired him some, and we made a difference. And that's always a good thing.
Yeah, at the end of the day, right, they're people just like us. And
They
so
are.
I think and I've heard that a lot about George W. is his investment in people, where he knew everybody in the staff, that he knew their names, he knew about their families. So it doesn't surprise me that a 2 minute meet and greet was extended a little bit.
We kept the Italian prime minister waiting while we finished our conversation, as it turns out. That was fine, but it was good.
There you go. There's your the two truth and the lie icebreaker that they have you do sometimes.
Yeah,
You can work that in.
I could work that in. Yeah, that would be,
Yeah,
I should do that. Well,
absolutely.
it was very enjoyable to be able to do that. Well, so when did you start your own company? That's been a little while at least.
Yeah, I started my first company that I started. I co-founded with my brother in 2005. I was working at a software company, and I started to just have an itch of I should start something. I don't know what that looks like. And I remember one time just talking to my wife, and I said, I don't want to be 75, 80 years old and think, what if?
Yeah.
And my wife is very practical, and she said, okay, so go for it. And if it doesn't work, just go get another job.
Yeah.
And when she broke it down like that, I just thought, wow, okay. I think she believes in me more than I do. So in 2005, I left the software company and we started a agency. And really at that point for me, yes, I wanted to start my own company and see if I could do it. But the big driving factor was at that point, we had 4 children. So we have 4, and they were all pretty small, and I was traveling all over the country, and I didn't want to miss their childhood. And I remember coming home from trips and hearing conversations or seeing things that I wasn't a part of. And I thought, this isn't right. I need to be here. I need to be home. So I went to the software company to ask them what they thought. They became my first client. And I did that from 2005 to just early 2017, when I resigned my position as CEO there, just to get my life back and kind of hit the reset button again. But this time I meant it. So I left, and they're still going. But that was my first foray into entrepreneurship, and I just kept doing it since. I started another consultancy, and now this is my third one, and also been part of about 2 to 3 other companies that we launched but never made it. So I enjoy the whole process. I love it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I will never say never, but the idea of not working for myself seems rather foreign to me.
So the first company you had for 12 years, what did that do? What
We
was the
were
company?
a marketing Yeah, we were a marketing services company. So we worked with business to business companies to help them in their demand generation, acquiring new customers, and also customer growth. So that's really where a lot of my career has been centered, is
Right.
helping companies design those strategies, everything from content to technology, to developing personas and putting together strategies on how to reach them when they're looking for something to buy that client offers.
Okay. Well, that makes sense, and certainly a worthy thing to do. So when did you form your current company, Digital Exhaust, which is a very clever name? You'll have to tell me about that.
Oh yeah, there's a little bit of a story behind that. So I was working in 2022, early 2022. I had an offer to go be the chief revenue officer of another agency, which my wife and I talked about it. We prayed about it, and I had a really, really close friend of mine who was their chief strategy officer at the time. So the ability to work with him, stay in the industry, and work with some really good clients, I jumped at. So I took that role over. That role lasted 8 months. I won't get into all those details of why. Never really did get a clear answer. The answer I was given, not exactly. The numbers didn't. I'll just say the numbers proved otherwise. All that said, that came to an end in 2023, I believe. Yeah, 2023. And so February 23. So at that point, I was like, okay, well, what do I do? I can try to go get a job, which I did. Nobody was really interested in, early 50s guy coming in. So, did the interview thing. And then I just thought, well, why don't I just bet on myself again and go for it? So at that point, my friend who was the chief strategy officer, he had also left. So he and I started talking and thought, why don't we just do this together? Services. He loves to implement. I love to sell. Let's just see if we can make a run at this. So here we are now. It'll be 4 years or 3 years, I guess, in February or April of 26. And we're still alive to talk about it. And so that's how it came to be. It was really just, I've done this before. There's no more security, I believe, in working for somebody else than working for yourself. So bet on yourself and put out your shingle and see what you can make happen.
Where did the name Digital Exhaust come from? That's a clever name.
Oh, thank you. We were batting around so many different names, and we just had a thing. I think we had a running Google sheet, like, let's just throw names up there. And then I was listening to a recording of a vendor that we had done work with in our early days. And he was talking about how you can track the digital movements of someone. And he said, so basically, they're leaving behind their digital exhaust. And he used the term twice. So I called my then partner, Tracy, and I said, hey, what do you think about the name Digital Exhaust as a company? And he was like, oh, I love it. So I said, well, before we do that, we have to call Dan and see if he would be okay. So I did some looking, the whole trademark search. And when I told our partner about it, he said, oh, my word, I love it. He said, never even thought that could be a name, but if you guys want it, go for it. So we took it, and it is. We think it's pretty unique, and it also describes a lot of what we do with customer data to get an understanding of how do you engage with them, where are they, and how are they going to interact with you and your brand.
How so?
Well, again, he was right. I can look at your digital footprint or your digital behavior. I can see what sites you've visited, what web pages you visited, how much time you spend on a product piece, how much content you engage. So I can look at all of that behind the scenes, start to score that. If you're an account that I want to go after, or if I'm a lead-based sale, that gives me a lot of intelligence on what you're interested in. And then there's ways to kind of, from a insight perspective, determine where you are in that journey, whether it's your first time as a purchase, you're a current customer and you're interested in purchasing something else. So it gives us a lot of insight into that, so that I can message you, or I also know when should sales place a phone call to you and start that conversation. So that's why we use the term digital exhaust, because again, it's a lot of what we do and how we use our customer data.
Several years ago, I watched a 60 Minutes program. Gosh, I don't know. It's actually a number of years ago. And one of the segments, there was a guy who was on, who's a private detective. And what he said was, I can tell more about you than most anyone else can simply by looking at your trash. In fact, I can't remember if it was Mike Wallace or not who was the interviewer, but they went on and investigated some trash cans, and this guy could just tell you so much about your entire life just by looking at what was in the trash can. It was really pretty amazing. And I don't mean that in any way as a negative thing, but it's very clever that people have that insight. So I appreciate what you're saying about digital exhaust. It makes perfect sense.
Well, good. I'm glad it does. It means we've hit the mark. I will say this, I'm not going to go through my customers' trash, but
No,
I am
no.
not surprised that if you did, how much you could learn about somebody. 100%.
But you do look at their digital footprint, and so
Yes.
again, it makes perfect sense that you can learn so much that can help you help them grow.
Yes. Absolutely.
Now,
Gives incredible insight.
you talk about making growth simple. Tell me more about what that means.
Yeah, I've been in the space a long time, and that really came a couple years ago. We started seeing different models that would come up, different frameworks that would come out from different vendors. Started talking, I talked to a lot of chief marketing officers in my role, and over, what we saw was just complexity of taking terms that everybody would know and applying a new term, creating a new term to replace the old term because you wanted to stay edgy. And I finally had a CMO who said to me, "This is all so complex. Is there any organization out there or any way to just make this simple?"
Mm.
And I thought, gee, I've kind of been thinking the same thing because I see all these talking heads out there on LinkedIn and at these conferences showing these overly complex, overly engineered models. And I'm like, you got to be a PhD to implement that thing. And again, I'm also a pretty simple guy. I don't think growth needs to be all that hard. If you know your customer, what they need, when they need it, and why it's important to them, I'm going to be able to sell you quite a bit. I'm also going to be able to be a better partner to you because I'll be the first one to be able to tell you you don't need that or you need that, but you shouldn't get it from us. And here's why. And so we just started saying, you know what, let's create with our models, and we have models and we have frameworks, but we want them to be kind of what Apple is, right? Really innovative where you can use it. You don't necessarily have to have someone to guide you through it. And so let's just make it as simple as possible for our clients to grow their companies without these over-engineered models, which mostly a lot of them are created to sell stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And while we want to sell stuff, more so, we want to help customers be better at what they do. And so that's what we say is we want to help you make growth simple, cut through the clutter, get to what matters, and move forward.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense by any standard. How do you find storytelling comes into what you do and how you interact with customers?
Yeah, it's really important in the beginning, right? In the beginning stages, anytime I'm engaging with you, if I'm a consumer and you're a brand, your brand should tell a story about who you are, the value that the customer gets when they're going to interact with you, they're going to use your product, what you stand for, can they trust you? Trust is huge right now. We live in a trust economy. I want to know that if you say something, you're going to stand behind it. So all of those things come through in terms of story. Now, what I've always said is I think that story is important, but when it comes to now, especially in the world I live in, business to business, once I get into maybe I want to purchase something for you or purchase your product, now it moves from a story to a dialogue because I start needing to know, what are you interested in? What are your challenges? What are your needs? What are your pain points? And as you're telling me that, I can respond more in a conversation. I can still use parts of the story, but now it's a two-way dialogue, even in a digital world. So if I can create that, that's fantastic. Then you become my customer. And now I still want to keep telling you stories. I want to tell you a story about why you can trust us. I tell you a story by how I interact with you. I tell you a story by how I deliver service and how I help you onboard. So all that bleeds into what what I call the big customer experience of from brand engagement to when I'm buying to now that I become a customer. All of those are experiential factors that we have to consider.
Well, yeah, and I think that storytelling is a very significant part of selling and sales because it's
Yes.
part of what really helps create the trust because people can see through it if you're just blowing smoke or playing games.
Yes, they can. Absolutely. And you only get one shot. If that's what
And
you're
you
going to do,
only
once
get
I
one
real
shot.
yeah, once I realize that, forget it. I'm not coming back.
Nope.
That brand loyalty goes away real quick.
Yeah. So do you encounter in the interactions that you have with people with a lot of burnout or who are going that way?
Oh yes. It's something that I went through in 2016. I mean, the World Health Organization, whatever you think about them, they definitely have listed it as a illness or as a condition. So it's something that I've seen. It's something that I've written against quite a bit. I don't think we need to get there, but I also think it is part of the consequence or the outcome of when we make work the center of our universe and we make work our God. When that's going to happen, then yeah, you're going to experience burnout. And I think burnout comes in different flavors, but I see a lot of people who are going through it, trying to work through it, trudge through it. I heard the term the other day, manage burnout. I don't know why you would want to manage burnout. I think you need to take steps to avoid burnout.
To avoid it, yeah. Why is it so many people face it and are experiencing burnout? Is it because they just deal with work, they don't relax, or what?
Well, I think there's a lot in that. I've done a lot of study, and that was the topic of my book that I released in 2019, The Un-American Dream. Is I think we, especially in our Western culture, we have adopted this idea that the busier I am, the more important and the more valuable I am. And so, and the reality is, none of us are wired to go, 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 go. Rest is actually a gift from the Lord. Mm-hmm. And, I think very few of us, but, think about the last time you talked to anybody. How are you? Oh, I'm so busy. We love to be busy. We love to have jam-packed calendars because it makes us feel good. The other part of it is when you think about workaholism, that is an addiction. And the only time, in my experience, we engage with or become addicted to something, it's when we're trying to avoid something else. Mm-hmm. And so I think our workaholism, which leads to burnout, is right up there with our rising rates of anxiety, of depression, of loneliness, because we have bought a false narrative that if we go, 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 we jam pack our calendars, we work like crazy until we hit some imaginary number where we can call it quits. That's what life is all about. And I just sit there and, my number one question to people who are running that race is, how's it working for you? Because you don't seem really happy right now. You don't seem fulfilled. And you're living on the promise of someday, and someday is not a day in the week.
Right. People ask me how are you all the time, and my response is something actually that I borrowed from somebody else. I just say I'm lovely. And I get agree. I get lots of reactions from that. It's kind of cute, but it's great. I agree with you. There's a need and a time, and it's appropriate to not work all the time.
Yes.
We don't ever take time even just to sit and think about what we did today. We don't take time at the end of the day to go in our own brains, how did this work out? How did that work out? Mm-hmm. Why didn't this work? Why did this work? What could I do to make it better? And then listen for answers. It's like praying. So many people, when they pray to God, they pray to Jesus and so on, they spend all their time praying and saying what they want, never realizing God already knows that.
Yeah.
When are you going to start listening for answers and really listening? And that's the challenge that I see so often. People don't listen, and the answers are always there. They're in their the inner voice that they can hear if they but practice.
Well, and I think to part of that is you need to be still, right? And we see that in Scripture where we're told, "Be still and know that I am God." We have so much noise and so much input with our phones and constant, interaction and constant noise. We don't give ourselves the ability to sit and think and process, to be still. And that is something that I would say really for me over the last decade has come into focus of, I enjoy my downtime. I enjoy the silence. It's one of the reasons when I run, I don't run with headphones. I want to be in my own little world, in my head, praying, thinking about things. So there are times I'll drive in the car without the radio on, just in silence. And I tell people that, and they look at me like I have three heads. And I'm like, oh, I am so much better for it because I'm no longer living life reactively. I'm able to live life in a way that brings me a lot of peace, a lot of joy, a lot of happiness. And when I work really, really hard, but it's definitely not the center of my universe.
I know people think I'm crazy, but I can go days without looking. Well, not days. I'll go a day. I do it volitionally, but I can go quite a while without looking at text messages.
Sure.
And when I do, there are messages there sometimes, but I know that I could actually go for a considerable length of time without needing to carry my phone around. Now, the only reason I do carry it around, I mean, clearly some phone calls can come in and so on, but I use other tools on it that you have access to in other ways. So I use it for those things, but the bottom line is that I don't need to have this phone with me to stay in touch with people all the time. So if I carry my phone more often than not, I will be in a hotel room listening to something on the phone and relaxing rather than all the other things that one could do with it.
Well, and the number of people that I talk to and research shows this, that, the last I saw was over 60%. It's the first thing people do when they wake up is they reach over and look at their phone. And I just sit there and say, what is so important that you can't even wait 15 minutes from the time your eyes open? But we've become addicted to it. We've become addicted to the noise, to the constant go, go, go. And then, we have a friend of ours last year was just, I'm so busy. Told my wife over the next 3 months, I only have this one day I can do lunch. And then you start realizing like, well, really, that's how you want to live your life over the next 90 days. You only have one day. Now, I didn't believe it when I heard that. I don't think they were trying to make excuse, and I don't think they were necessarily lying. I think in their heads, they really had this belief of, oh, I've only got one day out of the next 90. But we duped ourselves into believing that this is how we should be living life.
Yeah.
And it's not how I want to live life. I'll work hard. I'll put everything I've got into my clients and my business and things like that. But I don't want to be that strapped. I was that strapped one time, time-wise and work-wise, and it made me absolutely miserable.
I know when I wake up in the morning, I do reach for my phone right at the beginning. One of the very first things that I do is reach for it to see what the temperature is outside, to see what the temperature is in the house, to see whether I want to turn the heater on, but I don't look at messages. Right. I don't need to do that. I'll do it eventually. But, so as I say, I use it for other tools, but I use the phone because that's the tool that's available to me that gives me that information. And it'll help me decide, do I want to turn the heater on or do I want to turn the air conditioner off? And that's what I do. And then I put the phone down and I start visiting with the dog and the cat. And we have conversations, which is kind of fun. But
yeah, you get to enjoy life.
I remember the old technology. Now it's old BlackBerry.
Oh, yeah.
The Black and Research in Motion. There was one night when Research in Motion lost communications with all of the BlackBerries, and every BlackBerry went dead, I think, for about 12 hours. But I heard that even during the time when that occurred, people committed suicide because they had no way to look at their BlackBerries and get information. And I always thought, you're that dependent that you can't cope for a while, especially at night, without that information? Come on.
Yeah, it's staggering. The number of, again, over 50% of people said that they would be panicked if they went out without their phones. And so, and again, I used to live that way. So I understand it to a degree, but
I understand it. Yeah.
I also tell people you don't have to live that way because the people I know who live that way don't seem very content or fulfilled to me.
Right. Which is really the issue, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we only get one shot at this life, and I want to make the most of it.
Make growth simple.
That's right. Personal and business wise, right?
Personal and business wise. So what is hustle culture?
Well, hustle culture has been promoted by a lot of folks, a whole lot more well known than I am. Where Kevin O'Leary,
Ah,
famous for Shark Tank,
Shark Tank.
talks about you got to be willing to work 8 days a week, and give everything you've got. Gary Vaynerchuk talks about you know go 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 go, and we just see it out there of this. You've got to be willing to go above and beyond if you want to have success, if you want to make this money. You've got to just make sure you're willing to hustle at all costs, which to me, there's a place for that. As I said, when I'm working, I hustle, I work hard. I get in a zone, I kind of block everything out. And there are some weeks where we require over and above it,
Right.
60 a week is not something that has never been done. But the difference is there's a couple of differences is I'm going to work hard because that's what I'm told to do in scripture. It says that with everything you do, do it with all your might and do it to the glory of the Lord. So I'm going to do that. Plus, work was one of the first things that God ever created. He told Adam in the garden, I want you to work. Now, what we also see is that it was cursed when man sinned, and it was part of the curse in the garden. But I do believe work is noble. I believe it's valuable. I believe it has so many things it can teach us. So I'm hustling hard when I'm working, but this idea that I need to give everything I have to my business so that I'm successful. Well, what about our relationships? What about our own
work too.
Right, our own physical health. What about my marriage? All of these things that require work. Yet, you got a guy like Grant Cardone talking about 95-hour work weeks. That's insanity.
Yeah.
At what point, so to me, I really believe, and I've had some people who've argued with me over this. If you want to know what the object of your affection is, show me where you're spending the most time and attention.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not time or attention, time and attention. Because
right.
I cannot be quote unquote working, but I can be with my wife, but my brain is working. My brain is thinking about my work, thinking about my business, thinking about my career. So what good is it to her if I'm there or not?
Yeah.
I'm not investing in that relationship.
And that is just as much work as anything else.
And I would say the rewards are better and the gratification that much deeper.
So can work-life balance actually be attained?
I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in boundaries, and maybe I'm splitting hairs, but when I see that over 70% of people say that work-life balance is unachievable, it tells me it doesn't exist. It's also the only place in our lives where we try to separate work from life. Nobody talks about finance life business, kids life business, marriage life business, but we talk about work-life balance. Now I understand we spend a lot of time at work in our modern day culture, but if I can decide that I'm going to put boundaries around the things that matter most to me, so like work, like my relationships, like my physical, mental, and emotional health, my spiritual health, and that's how I've started to live life is instead of trying to balance everything, I'm going to set boundaries. So what does that look like? Well, the first thing I do in the morning is not check the phone. I get up, I pray, I have coffee with my wife. Sometimes we have really deep conversations. Sometimes we just let the caffeine kick in and let it wake up. And then we set time in prayer. So every day, pretty much between 8:15 and 8:30, I'm at my desk ready to work. But I've put a boundary around that morning time, which allows me to start the time with my Bible and with my wife. From 8:30 to about 12:30, I'm locked in. I am working. There's a boundary around that.
There's a boundary. Mm-hmm.
And then about 12:30 to about 2:00, that's my workout. I either go to the gym or I go for a run, come home, make my protein stuff, and then I'm back working again. And then when I'm done work between 5:30 and 6, I shut it down. Work is over, and now it's my personal life again, and whatever that looks like. And some of that is seasonal because of where I live. In the summer, it'll stay light till 9:30. In the winter, it gets dark by 4:30.
Yeah.
So there's quite a disparity. But because I have those boundaries, I know that I'm able to bring the best of myself to each of those areas of my life. And that is far easier than balance. And when one of those boundaries needs to move, I get to have a conversation. Hey, I've got a call tonight overseas. Do we have anything? Are we good if I take this call at 7:30 at night. So I take the call at 7:30 at night, but I have that discussion, and it takes more effort to move a boundary. It takes very little effort to get knocked off balance.
Yeah. And I think that makes perfect sense. I know for me, when Karen was here, we enjoyed breakfast and we enjoyed dinner. And I think there's a lot of value in that. Now, I was always the earlier riser, but partly because I worked for companies that kind of required that. That is to say, I worked, for example, when I lived in the East for California companies, so I ended up being there later. But when I worked in the West calling the East, I had to be in work by 6 because that's what I needed to do. But we agreed on that. And I hear exactly what you're saying. The fact of the matter is that you've got to really make some decisions. But if you're in a relationship, then you both have to agree and make the decisions together, which is what really should happen.
100%. And those boundaries will change. I mean, my boundaries now that I'm an empty nester, had I lived this way 15 years ago, would have looked far different because I still had children at home. Yeah. And so the boundaries can shift and change. But to your point, you have to talk about that. And what I have come to believe is that if I'm making those decisions in regards to my business, my job, my career, and I'm not having the conversation with my significant other, then I'm not sacrificing anything. I'm just selfish. And yet what we see is, you got to sacrifice for your business. I've said to couples before, if you and your wife believe and want to say, hey, we want to go build this thing and we want to go sell it, so we know the next 5 years we're hardly going to see each other and we're both on board with that and this is what we want, go in peace. I think you're nuts, but go in peace.
Yeah, but still, you made the decision together.
That's right. And that's the difference. And I find that a lot of people do not do that. And I also think it adds to the stress and the loneliness and the anxiety and the depression, is because we're chasing something that is so fleeting. And no matter what empire we may build professionally, we can't take it with us.
Right. And that's something that I wish more people would truly realize. It would make for a much happier world.
It would, but the unfortunate part is until the pain and consequence of how you're living outweighs the fear of change, most likely you're never going to do anything different.
Right. So tell me, go ahead.
No.
Oh, okay. Tell me about the title of the book, The Un-American Dream. Where did that come from, and why did you name the book that? Why was that the title, and so on?
Yeah. In 2016 is when I informed the company that I had started with my brother 11 years earlier that I was stepping down. Didn't really know what that looked like. I literally just one day, through the help of a friend and God's good grace, decided that it was time for me to go. And so the way they wanted to handle it in end of the year, I think this was like end of October-ish when I made that decision, they said, you know what, let's not announce anything. We don't want our clients to get spooked in Q4. So let's wait until the turn of the new year. So that was into 2017. So I made a post and I published it in February 2017 about why I was leaving the company, some of the things that I was learning along the way. And what surprised me was the phone calls and emails I got from colleagues who said, hey, I just read your post. Can we talk? I'm kind of thinking about the same thing. I'm miserable. And it was one email in particular that still stands out where he said, I'm miserable. And I started to think like, wow, okay, this is not just me. My circumstances were different, but this seems to be a problem. So I started to just do some research on our obsession with work, the number of hours we work, this idea of balance and hustle culture, really immersed myself in it. And I thought, this isn't what Truslow Adams meant when he coined the term, the American dream. We're killing ourselves for what? Like for what's the objective here? To just add another zero to my bank account? So as I started to do that research, I saw myself in a lot of that same story, and the mistakes I made and how I was, I had put my business first, all the things that we've talked about. And I thought, man, this is really quite un-American, really, because we say we're the land of the free and the home of the brave, but we're not free if we're slaves to our company or our jobs or our careers. So I thought, you know what? I think what we're doing to ourselves is un-American, and we're chasing the un-American dream. And that's how I came up with the title. Michael, you're on mute, my friend.
Can't trust me. Who have been some of your greatest influencers?
Wow. I have had a lot. Obviously, my parents have been huge influences in my life. My mom is a fierce prayer warrior. And so I fervently believe I would not be where I'm at today if it wasn't for her and her faithfulness in that. And my dad has been in marketing and sales and advertising, so learned a lot from him just in life and then also in business. There's a gentleman who lives up the street who is kind of like a second dad to me. It's an interesting relationship because his son is also my best friend. But a gentleman by the name of Keith Vanderweel, who is salt of the earth, wise, just a wise man, has loved me, has, when needed, given me a swift kick in the rear end, and just really helped keep me focused and been one of these guys that I can go to. And it's he's about almost 20 years older than I am. So he's one that has seen more and done more. So I'm thankful for that. And then I am very fortunate to have about 3 or 4 very, very dear friends, close friends. I mentioned one, Keith's son, who spur me on to greater things, encourage me when necessary, rebuke me, and help me. And then I would say more than anything, my wife. I learn stuff from her each and every day. Her steadfastness, her grace, her strength of character. She is absolutely the strongest person I know and has been the biggest influence in my life.
When I was in college, did radio, and I've always liked comedy. I've always liked trying to be a little bit flip and so on.
Yep.
But I will tell you that my wife constantly amazed me. She was pretty much a lot more straight-faced and straight-laced than I. But when she came out with a zinger, it came out of left field and you never saw it coming. She was amazing. Clearly, she observed me a whole lot more than I thought she did.
Right. And what a gift that is to have. My wife and I we went out for brunch today with it being the holiday. And I told her, I said, I just love how much we laugh.
Yeah.
And what a gift that is to have in your marriage. We're just laughing together and laughing at each other in a way that's not demeaning, but appreciates our differences. And, we can tease each other and enjoy it and know it comes from a place of love.
Yeah. How do we deal with the epidemic of loneliness in our lives and in our world?
Wow, that's a great question. It's first of all, I think it's heartbreaking. I see this especially with men, and statistics would show that men especially struggle with loneliness. I think number one is we have to come to the realization we were not meant to live in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
We are communal beings. God created us to live in community, and we need to step into that. And part of that is letting your guard down and being vulnerable and letting people know where you struggle. Now, I'm not talking about wearing your heart on your sleeve and walking up to every stranger and spilling, but those closest of relationships. And I can say, for me, when I isolated, that's when I became the worst form of myself and went to places I never thought I would go. And so I think loneliness, first of all, get off social media and your phone, because that's not a connection.
No.
Your friends, all of your thousands of friends on Facebook are not true friends. They're people you know, but they're not people that are going to walk with you through some of the hardest times of your lives. And so find that group, find that community, whether it's your church, whether it's a small group that you take part in, whether it's people at your work, but really start to invest in those relationships and bring as much to it as you're expecting them to. And for me, it became just with those closest relationships, I'm an open book. I'm not going to BS. I'm going to talk about what's on my heart, what I'm struggling with, what my victories are, what my low points are. And for me, that starts with my spouse. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned, I've got 3 other men in my life that are around my age that I can confide in, be open with, and it's the most freeing, wonderful thing. And they're relationships that I cherish. And I think that's how we end this cycle of loneliness. But I think a lot of people have been duped. I've got a bunch of friends online.
Yeah.
Put the phone down, get off your social media platform, and go be human and interact with other people.
It gets back to the same thing we talked about earlier. There's a whole big difference between head knowledge and really knowing. And
Yes.
The friends who are truly your friends are people who you know and who know you, and that you can truly be honest with and who will be honest with you. And that is not something that you get from all those Facebook friends. Otherwise, you're being awfully silly.
Right. And I also think we have to get out of this idea in our culture that if I don't affirm you, I somehow don't like you anymore. This idea that tolerance and love are the same thing. Some of my closest friends have been some of the ones that have come to me and said, hey, here's what we've observed. And we're pretty sure you don't like that about you. And, this needs to change. And I love that. I love that I have friends who will call my stuff, and a wife who will say to me, this isn't the best you. Like, what's going on here? I need that in my life, because if all I want to do is have people pat me on the back and affirm me, I'm going to get entitled pretty quick.
Yeah. And that doesn't help at all.
Right.
How do we bring civil discourse to our society? We're in an environment and in a world where we just don't appreciate or have conversations anymore. How do we deal with that?
Well, I think a couple of things. First of all, I think we have to get back to an appreciation for and a respect for human life and humanity in general. Michael, I'm sure if you and I spent a few hours together, we would eventually land on a topic that we don't agree on. I can be okay with that.
Sure.
And because if I'm open to say, hey, Michael's a human being, he's smart, he's overcome incredible odds in his life, and maybe if I listen, I can learn something. Doesn't mean I'm going to come to your side of the position, but I can at least learn something. But I think systematically over decades, we've been denigrating the value of human life. I mean, how many millions of babies have we aborted in this country? Your own story, your parents were told, hey, just put him in a home. He's not going to amount to anything because of his blindness. That's insanity. So today, instead of civil discourse, if I don't like you, I berate you online, I make something up about you, or I kill you. And
right.
So, and to tell you how far we've gone, not only does that happen, but then we're going to have people who celebrate in the murder of whether it's an insurance CEO or a Charlie Kirk or anybody. And I just sit there and say, okay, we've gone so far past civil discourse. And so I think number one is just a respect and a value for human life, which we have a lot of work to do there. And then number two, again, back to what I said, this idea that if I disagree with you, I somehow don't love you anymore. And the example I use is this idea of, well, we need more tolerance and affirmation. There was a time, Michael, where my behavior within our marriage just was unacceptable. I mean, I was cheating on my wife. And once she found out, she still loved me, but she couldn't tolerate the behavior for reasons that I think I need to explain. So at that point, you say, all right, well, how do those two things work together? If I had kept doing what I was doing, I know for 100% she would have loved me till the day she died, but she wouldn't have been able to stay with me because you can't tolerate that behavior. Right. Was she supposed to affirm that? Yeah. And so this idea that because I quote unquote love you, I affirm you, I actually make the case that if I love you, I'm going to help you be the best form of yourself, which sometimes means disagreeing with you and pointing things out in your life that aren't healthy.
That's fair.
And so I think we have to get back to that place of we can have disagreement, still have respect for each other. We can disagree vehemently and still do it respectfully.
Right.
And then at the end of the day, I can respect your position because of who you are as a person. And that, giving you the benefit of the doubt, this is a well thought out position. And so, okay, great. We agree to disagree. We can still be friends.
Yeah. And we might learn something, or at least be put on a path where we think about it, and we may discover that, that person's right.
Correct.
Yeah, which is cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not that hard. And again,
No,
do your homework. Know
it's,
what the real issues are and stop reading headlines on social media.
yeah, really get away from that. What else should we know about you?
Well, I'm the father of four amazing kids, spread all over the country, ages 30 to 20. He'll be 24 in 10 days. Um, and then an amazing daughter-in-law, soon-to-be daughter-in-law. My second son is engaged, gets married next year. I love the outdoors, anything outside. And I would say if I want your audience to remember anything, it's that what Jesus Christ has done in my life has been nothing short of amazing. And like I said at the beginning, this is my operating system, and it's who I am, and my reason for being in each and every day. And I sit here and I just am in awe of the life I get to live. So I'm very, very thankful and very, very humbled by it all.
If people want to reach out to you and maybe explore working with your company, using your company to help them, how do they do that?
Yeah, you can email me at carlos@digitalexhaust.co. It's not .com. So make sure it's .co or I won't get it. So you can shoot me an email, visit our website, which is digitalexhaust.co, or look me up on LinkedIn, just Carlos Hidalgo.
Hidalgo, right?
That is correct. Yeah, I appreciate you getting the name right on the introduction. So thank you for that.
I worked at it. Well, I want to thank you for being here. This has been wonderful. And as I tell people all the time, if I'm not learning at least as much as anybody else on this podcast, then I'm not doing my job well, which means I do need to listen and think about it. And I appreciate all the insights that you gave us today. And I appreciate all of you being here and being with Carlos and me. Love to get your thoughts. Please reach out to Carlos. Please email me at michaelhi@accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com. But most of all, wherever you're listening or watching the podcast, please give us a 5-star review and a rating. We love that. We love your input. Please, of course, I want it always to be positive, but I'll take whatever you send because we value that. And for all of you, and Carlos, you as well, if you know anyone else who ought to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love it if you'd let us know. We're always looking to meet more people to help show that we're all more unstoppable than we think we are. And with that, I want to thank you again, Carlos, for being here. This has been absolutely fun.
Michael, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.